Good evening, I am Catharine Beecher. I was born September 6, 1800 in East Hampton, New York. You may know my father, Reverend Lyman Beecher, and my biological mother, Roxana Foote Beecher. My family was well known in our community for being dedicated to reform. Growing up, my mother and father did everything they could to teach us everything there was to know. As I got a little bit older, my parents sent me to a private school in Litchfield. Though my father spent much money on my education, it was the early 19th century and women just did not get the same education as men did. But this was not going to stop me from pursuing my education, which I believe to be so important, something I learned from my mom and dad. I ended up teaching myself the material that was available only to men at the time, such as math, Latin, and philosophy. My education was extremely helpful in bringing up my younger siblings. My mother passed away in 1816 of tuberculosis. It was an awful time, and I was left to raise my siblings. My mother would be proud as they all became very successful. My sister, Harriet Beecher Stowe, may sound familiar as she wrote the famous novel Uncle Tom's Cabin. Another of my sisters, Isabella Beecher Hooker, became a suffrage leader. My brother, Edward Beecher, was an abolitionist, and my brother, Henry Ward Beecher, became a pastor in Brooklyn and attracted thousands with his views on women's rights and anti-slavery. I became engaged in my early 20s to my dear Alexander Fisher. He was a young Yale professor and mathematician. I never imagined my worst nightmare coming to life, but it did. My love, Alexander, died in a shipwreck off the coast of Ireland in 1822. I could not have pushed through this horrific nightmare if it weren't for my brothers and sisters. I vowed to stay true to my dear Alexander's memory, and in doing so, I pursued my dreams and passions. I never got remarried. I couldn't bring myself to do so, as my Alexander would live on in my heart forever. In 1821, I began teaching in a private school. I'm passionate about education, but I did not enjoy my time there. I was not given sufficient enough materials. My students were very difficult, and I really did not care for the townspeople. I realized that my purpose was elsewhere, so I left teaching only to return on occasion to train or demonstrate. My early career was devoted to promoting education for women and the evolution of education as a profession. I founded multiple schools, one of which was a school for young women in Hartford, which in 1824 became the Hartford Female Seminary. I did this with my little sister Isabella. It was an honor to know that by 1831, the seminary had become one of the premier women's schools in the United States. In most female schools of the era, students learned primarily fine arts and languages. But we at Hartford Female Seminary were proud to offer a full range of subjects to these girls. One which I am particularly proud of is physical education, in which I introduced these girls to exercises that would improve their health. I love this because at the time, there were prevailing notions of women's fragility, and I really wanted to challenge that notion, and I could do so by teaching these girls physical education. By 1831, I decided it was time to move on. I moved with my father when he became president of Lane Theological Seminary, a progressive Cincinnati institution in Ohio. There, I founded another women's school in Cincinnati called the Western Female Institute. After the success we had in Hartford, I had high hopes for this institute. However, I lacked financial support due to the Panic of 1837, and my institution was unsuccessful. I did not let this get to me down, though. In the 1840s, I founded the Central Committee for Promoting National Education and worked to recruit teachers for schools on the Western frontier. Then, in 1852, I joined some others, and together we founded the American Women's Educational Association, which planted higher learning institutions for women in Illinois, Wisconsin, and Iowa. I strongly believe in limiting men's power by increasing women's. School teaching is a vehicle by which women as a group can establish cultural power. Once women are properly educated and employed as school teachers, they could further expand their sphere of influence and have an effect on events both local and national. Have you noticed the overwhelming gender gap in teachers of your day? You can thank women such as myself for that. You know, I believe that it is women's innate ability to be a teacher, and that women can, quite frankly, do a better job than men. Don't get me wrong, I strongly feel that men and women are equal, but I do not want the fields of men and women to be combined. I feel that they are very separate. Rather than feminism, I have a strong belief in equality. I want to ensure that the professions of men and women are of equal importance. If women belong in the home and men in the world, then women should receive an education in child rearing, home economics, and domestic concerns that was as rigorous and valuable as that which men received in law, medicine, or business. Neither one of these is more important than the other. You may be able to see that the societal view of careers today is that women should be child rearers and educators, and men should be in medicine, business, or law. My views are not contrary to the views of most of society in my day, so it is understandable why I would believe that women have their specific careers while men have theirs. In my first published writing, Female Education, I said, "A lady should study not to shine, but to act." I truly feel that education is a gift that women should be able to partake of, just as men can. Education improves a woman's character, which in turn enhances her abilities to deploy her natural qualities. These qualities include the ability to nurture, the ability to be compassionate, intelligence, a soft heart, integrity, empathy, humility, and so on and so forth. However, I do believe that these qualities in women's studies should not be discussed, but merely practiced in her everyday endeavors. A woman is to read books, but not talk of them, but to bring the improvement they furnish to the ratification of her principles and the formation of her habits. I know many young people of your generations might find my views to be contrary to their beliefs, but for many older people in the older generations that are still with us may agree with me that women should not discuss their education, but rather apply it. This is not such a popular topic with men, though. As my life progressed, I began writing and publishing many writings, including The Moral Instructor for Schools and Families, containing lessons in the duties of life. I published that in 1838. In 1842, I published a treatise on domestic economy for the use of young ladies at home and at school. And in 1874, I published Educational Reminiscences and Suggestions. Through these publications, you'll be able to see how my philosophy of education and gender roles developed and expanded through my life. It was nice to meet you all, but I better be off.